Hi guys, today I wanted to discuss a concept called slow productivity. It's proposed by Cal Newport in his book with the same name, and so we'll look at this book to get a deeper understanding of the concept. Before we get started, it's worth noting that this book is primarily applicable to people in a knowledge work sector, so people who have some autonomy over their work. If you're a factory worker or someone who has to follow a specific guideline, it might be harder to implement these ideas, but it's still worth considering. The core idea that the book explores is that the problem which knowledge workers experience is not a lack of productivity, but rather the fact that productivity has a faulty definition in the knowledge worker industry. Newport's philosophy ultimately rejects busyness as a badge of pride, instead viewing overload as an obstacle to producing results that matter. It's worth first looking at what productivity actually means. To begin with, let's first understand what knowledge work means. Newport defines it as the economic activity in which knowledge is transformed into an artifact with market value through the application of cognitive effort. Thus, any service that doesn't provide physical labor and instead includes the monetization of our knowledge is knowledge work. In the knowledge worker industry, it's becoming increasingly harder to define what productivity actually means. In agricultural and industrial jobs, it's relatively easy to measure productivity, as it's simply the output that you produce. With a knowledge worker job, you could perhaps measure the quantity of academic papers produced, but this doesn't account for the quality of those papers. In an attempt to fix this, we engage in what Newport refers to as pseudo-productivity. This essentially means that we're constantly demonstrating a sense of busyness, whether this is through constantly engaging with emails, attending lots of meetings, or always responding in a company group chat. Although this is a visible demonstration of busyness, it doesn't actually produce much value. A colleague who is far less visibly busy may actually be producing more work at a higher standard, but it wouldn't be easy to identify. With this tendency towards pseudo-productivity, many people are operating at close to 100% of their capacity at all times. If busyness equals productivity, then maximizing the things that you do seemingly suggests that you're being the most productive. The issue with operating at this level is that any unexpected changes can cause major disruption, ultimately leading to burnout. When adjusting to online teaching, this required a significant time investment into learning the necessary skills, preparing a suitable workplace at home, preparing online lessons, and dealing with children online. All of this came as an additional requirement, but only to achieve the same standard, or even still worse standard, than physical in-person teaching. Assuming a teacher was previously operating at 99% of their full capacity in terms of time scheduled, they would suddenly be pushed well beyond 100%, as they had to make all these adjustments just to maintain their previous level of work. This obviously isn't possible to sustain, leading to significant burnout. This is likely what fueled the anti-work movement during the pandemic, as people realized that the work they were doing was simply not possible to sustain. With that being said, it's worth re-exploring approaches to the knowledge work industry, as our current concept of productivity clearly isn't working out. In this video, we'll explore 3 key principles. Number 1, do fewer things. Number 2, work at a natural pace. And number 3, obsess over quality. Principle 1, do fewer things. Newport introduces this principle by stating, strive to reduce your obligations to the point where you can easily imagine accomplishing them with time to spare. Leverage this reduced load to more fully embrace and advance the small number of projects that matter most. A key concept within this principle is the idea of overhead tax. When you take a new task on board, it comes with an overhead tax. This includes things such as sending emails, organizing meetings, and attending those meetings, or even commuting to and from the location where the task takes place. All of these things are separate from the task itself and don't contribute to the actual work being produced. This is the exact idea we discussed in our previous example about online teaching. Although the job for the teachers remained the same, they suddenly had an increase in overhead tax, which required them to invest more time just to extract the same results. You can think about it like this. Assuming you work for 8 hours per day, if you were to take on one assignment at a time, and the logistical aspects of each assignment takes only 1 hour, you would have 7 hours remaining to work on the task itself. However, if you took on 4 assignments at the same time, you would spend half your working day resolving the logistical tasks, meaning you'd only have 4 hours to work on any assignment itself. This would essentially double the amount of time it takes to complete each assignment. This is a clear demonstration that doing less may actually enable more results. Looking at a solution to this then, we can begin to limit the commitments we make in our lives to extract the most value out of the fewer ones we take on. The first idea is to limit missions. A mission is simply an ongoing goal or service that directs your professional life. For example, this might include writing a book, running a YouTube channel, or completing a university degree. Ultimately, when it comes to the optimal number of missions, less is generally better than more. Some people's lifestyles simply don't allow for them to dedicate themselves to one mission, so a rough guideline is around 3. By focusing on each of these tasks at a time, it becomes easier to control them. This allows you to improve the quality that goes into each, while simultaneously reducing the risk of burnout. On a similar note, we want to limit projects. Projects are any task that take longer than a single work session. This might include creating a new web page for your company, or producing a video for your YouTube channel. Some projects are ongoing, meaning they don't have an identifiable stopping point, such as answering questions from clients. We have a tendency to take more on board than we can successfully accomplish. Identifying an actual number of projects to take on board, or scheduling your time in accordance to these projects, can resolve this. If somebody asks you to take a new task on board, it's much easier to point to your packed schedule and say that you don't have time to take it on board, than to appeal to a vague sense of busyness. As you schedule your projects, you'll begin to develop a sense for the amount of work you can successfully complete at one time, meaning that you can relax the procedure as time goes on. However, actually identifying the time investments you currently have can enable increased clarity over the amount of work you can realistically get done. And on the smallest scale, we next look at limiting daily goals. Here, the best suggestion is to work on one project a day. You will of course have other obligations that you need to complete in the day, but when it comes to bigger, more important tasks, it's best to pick one to focus on. This might be something such as producing a video, working on a university project, or studying for a particular exam. The reason why we limit ourselves to one project a day is because it reduces the amount of effort required to swap between tasks, ultimately improving our ability to focus on a single task. This brings us back to the idea of overhead tax. We can effectively reduce overhead tax if we create an autopilot schedule. What this ultimately means is that by reducing the amount of effort associated with completing tasks, we can reduce the perceived overhead tax. For example, a student may assign certain regularly occurring classwork to certain times on certain days, or maybe even at a specific location. If I have a lecture from 10 until 12 every Monday, and then I have a break from 1 until 2, I can sit down and work on my book review in the university cafe. If I do the same routine every Monday, I'll soon begin completing this work without even needing to think about it, reducing the amount of planning, and thus, overhead tax that's required for each project. Try to identify a specific time to complete each task in the day. Perhaps you can implement a specific washing day, or grocery shopping day, or even creating a specific day to review your work week and identify if your schedule is working out. Then, on that same day and same time every week, you can complete that task. This can make it a lot easier to stay consistent, as you know when you need to do the work, so it's not up to how you feel at the time. The final idea of this principle is to pull instead of push. Instead of taking on multiple new tasks at the same time, you can create a holding tank for tasks, while limiting your active tasks to 3. Every time there's a new task to complete, add it to the holding tank. Only take this task on board once you've completed one of your active tasks. This method allows you to never have more than 3 ongoing tasks at a time, but it also ensures that you don't lose track of the other tasks and you will eventually get round to completing them. If you don't have this holding tank, you might find yourself taking on 10 tasks at the same time, and as we previously discussed, this will reduce the speed at which you can complete any one of those tasks. Therefore, when you have a new task, add it to a list, but only take the task on board once you have a spot within your active tasks list. Principle 2. Work at a natural pace. Here, Newport writes, "Don't rush your most important work. Allow it instead to unfold along a sustainable timeline with variations in intensity, in settings conducive to brilliance." The first suggestion is to make a 5-year plan. The specific choice of 5 years isn't necessary, but you essentially want to make a long-term plan. If you've just started a 3-year degree, then making a 3-year plan might be more useful. Essentially, you want to identify specific things that you wish to accomplish over this time period. By making this plan, you give yourself an incentive to revisit your goals, but you'll also allow yourself breathing room to have busy periods where you aren't working on your goals. If you wish to write a book, but you have a busy university season, this plan will allow you to have some downtime to focus on university, without stressing about the lack of progress being made on your book. When you have time again, you can then return to working on the book. This long-term plan enables exploration without the feeling that you've given up. Being able to return to something again after an extended period of time is easier if you've given yourself a longer time frame to accomplish that task. Meanwhile, during this downtime, you can go through experiences that help build your new approach when you inevitably do return to the task. The next suggestion is to double your project timelines. Newport suggests that for any project you wish to complete, you should double the expected completion time. If you expect something to take you a week to produce, then give yourself 2 weeks to produce it. The argument here is that humans aren't especially good at estimating the required time for cognitive endeavors. A natural fear in response to this is that this increased timeline will result in a significant decrease in accomplished work. However, Newport claims that the initial timeline was never realistic to begin with, and so you wouldn't have accomplished this initial goal anyhow. This does, of course, invite an opportunity for procrastination, so continuing to schedule your work is important. The extension of your project timelines simply protects against the likelihood that your estimated completion time of a task will be longer than expected, but the assumption is that you continue to work on the task in the same way you normally would have in that initial time frame. Another idea is to protect your workday. As humans are overly optimistic about the amount of work they can complete in a day, it's important to provide enough time to complete your necessary tasks. The method Newport provides goes as follows. Every time you add a meeting to your calendar for a given day, find an equal amount of time that day to protect. This way, no day can end up with more than half its time dedicated to meetings. This provides you with a safety window to complete your daily tasks, while still providing the availability for meetings. If you blocked off certain days or hours for work, your inaccessibility might arouse conflict or annoy people who are trying to meet with you. However, implementing a more subtle rule, which works to provide protected time based around your meetings, you can still get this important time to work on projects without having to enforce strict rules. Newport's next proposal is to embrace seasonality. The underlying idea here is to schedule certain parts of the year to have reduced work. You can schedule the bulk of your work for a specific time within the year, and then experience some relief from the heavy workflow by taking on easier tasks at another time in the year. For example, as a student, I have a heavy season of projects to complete from January until May. Using this period as my busy season of the year, I can focus on producing high quality work and invest the majority of my time into completing these projects. However, in the months that follow, I can use this time to actively recharge and take a break from my work so that I'm prepared for the next season. At work, a similar approach can be taken. You can perhaps work on heavy, important assignments in the winter months when you're more likely to spend more time indoors. Then, in the summer months, you have more time to travel or relax. The key to this approach is to schedule your slow season after you've completed major projects and before taking on any new ones. You can approach this by taking on a highly visible but low impact project, such as creating a new interface for the company website. Assuming you have 2 months to work on this project, you can spend the first month taking advantage of a reduced workload, where you can deflect other tasks as you're working on your current project. However, you can then use the second month to do most of the work, effectively providing yourself with a temporary break, while still accomplishing the task. Another valuable point is to take advantage of certain contexts that will assist you with your work. Inhabited space transcends geometrical space. We associate meaning with locations that differ from the literal meaning it has. A forest isn't just a collection of trees, but it instead provides you with a sense of peace and evokes creative thoughts that might help you with your work. A cafe might provide a comforting atmosphere that makes you feel more productive, as you can see others around you working. Finding a location that matches the work you complete might help inspire and motivate you. If you're a wildlife painter, going to a forest to do your work might help you. If you're an engineer, you can decorate your room with certain gadgets. If you're a musician, maybe you want to surround yourself with instruments. Matching your workplace to your job can help you work at a natural pace. That brings us to principle 3, obsess over quality. As Newport states, obsess over the quality of what you produce, even if this means missing opportunities in the short term. Leverage the value of these results to gain more and more freedom in your efforts over the long term. This principle is mentioned last because it functions as the glue to hold the other two principles together. If you just did fewer things and worked at a natural pace, it would almost function as an excuse to do less work overall and just be lazy. By obsessing over quality, you're able to take advantage of the benefits that working at a natural pace provides. Newport proposes that you improve your taste. He acknowledges that people who begin a creative task get into it because they have a vision that they want to achieve. They have a specific taste that they can envision, but they're not yet capable of producing it. The only way to bridge this gap between taste and ability is through deliberate effort to create things and develop skills. If you wish to make cinematic videos, yet have no experience, then producing a large quantity of content, even if the quality is low, is going to be more fruitful than focusing on quality but producing minimal content. The reason for this is because your taste develops as you become more experienced. When you first produce something, you might be satisfied with the outcome, but upon reviewing it further along in your career, you realize that it's shockingly low quality. If you were to use 100% of your capacity right now to produce something, you might be able to reproduce the same thing using only 40 or 50% of your maximum capacity in a year or two. The best step to improving then is to improve your taste. This can be achieved by viewing the work of others who are more experienced than you. For example, if you want to make films, watching movies that have been produced by influential figures can help give you a guideline as to what level to aim for. Reading reviews of these films can allow you to identify what aspects made the movie so successful, and you can then implement these skills into your own work. However, this isn't specific to films. It's simply about immersing yourself in fields that are different from your own. When you study an unrelated field, the pressure is reduced, and you can approach the topic with a more playful openness. This allows you to get a brief escape from the frustration you might experience when comparing the work within your field to the work of those who are above you. This might reignite the joy that you first experienced when you decided to take on your current career path. Additionally, you can form a group of like-minded individuals. By identifying people who are interested in the same craft as you and working alongside them, you can shift your mind into a higher gear than working alone. When people work together, they typically have a desire to impress one another. This might encourage each individual to operate at a higher standard than they typically would. If each individual has a desire to prove themselves and holds one another accountable, you can harness the power of group work as a method of rapid improvement. Investing in your interests is another great method of improving quality. Many people invest in certain equipment more so for the feel that comes along with it than the actual purpose it provides. For example, a podcaster might upgrade from a simple microphone to an expensive $400 microphone. A computer programmer might have a 3 or 4 monitor setup, and a novelist might invest in a more expensive program to write their books. While all of these things do serve an improved function, the primary benefit they provide is the feeling that the person using them is now a professional. A cinematographer investing in an expensive camera, an athlete investing in some expensive shoes, or a researcher investing in an expensive notebook all provide an incentive to focus on improving the quality of your work. Therefore, an investment in your interests can help to encourage you to slow down and focus on performing at the highest level possible, instead of focusing merely on the amount of work you output. This obsession over quality can lead to issues regarding perfectionism. As a solution, Newport writes, "Give yourself enough time to produce something great, but not unlimited time. Focus on creating something good enough to catch the attention of those whose taste you care about, but relieve yourself of the need to forge a masterpiece. Progress is what matters, not perfection." You should give yourself enough time to feel satisfied with the work you produced, but not feel as though it has to be perfect. To summarize then, we should focus on reducing the amount of tasks we take on board and providing more time to complete those tasks. The unclear definition of productivity within the knowledge work industry has led to a culture of pseudo-productivity, where we demonstrate a constant state of busyness but severely limit our actual output. Taking a slower approach is actually the key to producing more work, as paradoxical as it may sound. When we operate close to 100%, we don't provide any leeway for any adjustments, which inevitably leads to burnout, and makes us less efficient. Slowing things down, reducing our obligations, and shifting to a focus on quality over quantity will not only make us more valuable, result in more meaningful output, and increase the rate at which we can produce, but will also increase our life satisfaction, enable opportunities for improved creativity, and resolve the endlessly optimizable life path many of us seem to be taking. Overloading is an obstacle to producing what actually matters. Thanks for watching the video. Today we looked at Slow Productivity by Cal Newport and saw how we can apply these concepts into our work to produce more work by doing less.